And welcome to the Natural Balance Hoof Care Corner. We've covered the larger breeds of horses, everyday kind of saddle horses and whatnot, as far as trimming and maintenance for their feet. We've had a lot of requests for these minis and burros. How do you maintain them, and are they different than larger horses? So we're going to go ahead and go through the procedure for you, primarily because they have some things that are kind of unique to them for a lot of them. Angular deformities are probably one of the issues that most people are concerned with, and they want to know how to manage those different things. So we're going to go ahead and take one that has some severe deformities and show you how to approach it. Hopefully that'll be of some help to you, and then we'll also give you some guidelines on how to avoid these deformities in the earliest stages of the foal's life. So this has been a condition that's been with her for a long period of time, and they seem to hold up quite well, but over a period of time the joints seem to take their toll. So what we try to do is offer some guidelines on how to avoid this. Okay, we're going to start here on the front foot. It looks like we have plenty of foot to work with, so things that I want to point out to you right off the bat are that you see how these heels are starting to curl in. It's just an indication that the frog is not large enough for the most part to keep them pushed out. And this condition, I'm sure, has been here for some time. So what we're going to do is try to have a couple of goals in mind here. One is that we want to have the frog in contact with the ground if we can possibly do that. And this one, fortunately, doesn't have a flexor deformity, which means that they have the ones that have a flexor deformity have a foot that is very much upright. It's very difficult to get the heel down. This one is not that case. The heel runs forward, which is a positive thing in many cases, but it can also be a detriment in that they grow just as long as they do as the rest of the foot. And oftentimes the frog will shed out, the heels will then collapse. There's not enough dirt compaction in the bottom to keep those heels apart. So these are things that we're going to offer as a guide to sort of don't clean their feet out. It keeps the foot at its proper hydration level, as well as keeping the heels properly spaced apart and keeps them moving laterally. You can see this one is actually flexing inward now because the ground pressure is pushing down here, and you can actually see this heel move inward as I'm pushing straight down on it because the way the heel is curved. So keep that in mind. We're going to trim this heel down if the sole will allow us to do that. And as you can see, I'm going to make a mark right here. And if you look at it from this perspective, there's the ground level now, and if we trim it down, it's going to make the heel wider. I'll show you also that as I trim this heel down, this curve will disappear. That's very important. So we're going to try to reorganize the back of this foot, just like we are that one that's severely deformed on the back there. Okay, I'm going to just cut away this chalky material of the foot here, enough to find out where the waxy sole is, and that's the functional part of the sole. And that's the guide that I'm going to use to get this heel down to the proper level. Okay. It's very important to exfoliate the foot in a way that you can see very clearly where the live sole is. That's going to be your guideline. So I'm going to take plenty of time. If I do this part correctly, then I'm going to get the medial lateral balance of the foot done in the most efficient way, because we know that the thickness of the sole beneath the bone to this level of exfoliated material is exactly the same as it is on this side. And it's very important to know that when you're dealing with feet that are badly distorted, turned in, where the guidelines of balance seem to be heavily skewed. So you need to have some sort of reference that is more directed towards the coffin bone itself instead of the distorted hoof capsule. If you look down that foot, you say, well, there's the side is high and that side is high. But what you really need to find out is where the coffin bone is in relation to the live, flexible, functional sole. And by identifying these structures ahead of time, you'll avoid getting them trimmed too close. So, as you can see, there's the waxy surface. You can see it's still a little chalky right here, but it's waxy there. And right on this inside edge, you'll see where it's waxy right there. So that's my landmark that I'm going to use. And I'm going to make a mark right there. And to ensure that I don't get trimmed too close, I'm going to make a mark right there. I'll trim above that mark, and I'm going to exfoliate just a little bit more here on the toe to ensure that I can get as much off of that area as I can. Okay. Still a little, okay, there it is, right there. You can see that. So I'm going to mark that right there. So I'm going to trim above those lines. Those are my landmarks that I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple other marks here too. You'll notice that this appears to be about the widest part of the sole. I'm going to draw a line across. It's about a ½ an inch back from the apex of the frog, or a little less. And the guidelines for these little guys is obviously much different in that respect than the larger horses. So if you look at where the heel ends now, in the measurement from there's the place where breakover occurs, you can see this distance is a good 2, possibly 3 times longer than it is from here. So we're going to change those ratios as we trim this foot and get our foot back into equal proportions around that line at the widest part. Okay. Again, I'm keeping in mind that I'm going to leave that line there where at the side as well as around the front. This is what you call just merely connecting the dots. And keep in mind, looking at this heel now, remember as I trim this down, it's going to get wider. Keep your mind on this curvature right here. Okay. Now you can see that there's a change now that has occurred. This severe curve here now is just a little bit straighter. I'm going to clean out just a little bit right here between the frog without taking away any more of that material than I have to. The reason for that is that I want to be sure and get the heels back here far enough so that I can make the best improvement there is on this back part of the foot. You can see already that the distance from here at the widest part is now longer than it was before, and these proportions are nearly equal. If I would rocker that toe a little bit right there, this foot would be nearly balanced equally in both proportions. So that's just how simple it is. Once you draw a line across the widest part of the foot, it's easy to see how you can change those proportions by simply trimming the foot to the level of the sole equally on both sides. Okay, the mistake that's commonly made is that the tendency with the pigeon-toed horse especially is that tendency is to want to leave a little bit more on this outside, which would only encourage this heel to roll over even more. So I'm going to make sure, again, that I look at the sole very specifically and don't leave this outside any higher. The more I take this heel down, the straighter it becomes, and the wider it becomes as well. And now you can see with just a few strokes of the rasp how this curl that was once causing this foot to become deformed is now actually wider and longer at giving it support to this side. So that's very, very important. And with this foot, as with the back one, when this foot is flaring this way, the more I take this side down, the closer it comes to the center line. So using the sole as a guide is your best source of getting the foot balanced around the coffin bone equally from all proportions. So I've not over trimmed this. I'm not close to the sole. I've got live looking material here, but I'm not close to sensitive material. So I want to shorten this lever that's causing some of this distortion to occur. So I'm just going to create a natural rocker right in the toe because I have height of wall here and I have height of wall there. So I can go ahead and roll that just a little bit, and I'm going to roll it until I just touch that black mark and it starts to disappear. Okay, now what I have created here is a rocker point there, a rocker point there, and now this distance is shorter than this distance here. So this foot is in good natural balance now, and everything is proportionate. It's very flat to the ground from side to side, and the foot will not start to become deformed. Okay. If you look at these proportions, this side is actually wider than this side. I'll rasp a little bit of the flare off of this side. That'll make this side even wider. So she'll have plenty of lateral support. We're going to rasp a little of the medial flare off of this guy, so I've got to adjust this stand to sort of fit this little horse. She's got a very, very short, and these stands are made specifically for this purpose. And I try to keep one foot on the stand if I can to sort of stabilize it, and it helps to make the horse comfortable as well as myself. So if the foundation is firm here, then putting their foot on this stand, rasping around here, just taking what flare exists from a mid portion of the foot down, just try to straighten out this side of the wall. And with that foot on the stand, you see, they don't seem to object nearly as much because it's solid. You're not pulling them around, twisting and turning the foot. It's just like being on the ground. So I'm going to take as much of that medial flare as I can until I start to see a small portion of white coming through, which is halfway through the wall. That's my stopping point. And then I'll round the edge up. Same over here. Okay. And ends up being a lot straighter than it was. Continual trimming, probably a little more frequently, will allow this hoof distortion to disappear a little bit. Now this mare's got a little age on her. A lot of this, she's going to be this way the rest of her life. And to change it any more than a level with the ground to the level of the sole is not going to be in her best interest. So trying to change this condition is not the best thing to do, but not allowing it to get worse is the objective that we're trying to create here. Okay, now this is the type of foot that becomes very challenging and oftentimes never really gets resolved to a point where you can get the foot to resume any kind of normal shape. Obviously, as you can see, this wall is much taller than this one, even though it appears to be lower, and it probably is when she's moving. Again, simple mechanics of what we were talking about on the front foot. You see, this is where the bearing surface is. It's actually over the center of her foot right here. This is the center of her foot. So we're bearing for it. She's forcing everything to go over the lateral side. The thing that she needs is support out here. What she needs is a hoof wall that can be in this general area. Widen this side out by taking this wall away is going to offer her the best ground support. Now, we're not going to really take away any height by doing that, essentially speaking. There's going to be roughly 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch in height from here out to here. So we're going to trim this heel down at the same time. And as I mentioned on the front foot, this one is flaring this direction. This one is going this direction. The more I trim this one down, the wider and the longer it gets. You can see where it is right there. By the time we get it closer to this line, the heel support is going to be back here, and this one is going to be back as well, but it also is going to be this one is also going to be in farther, so the whole hoof is going to be better oriented around the center of the foot, of the coffin bone. In order to get in to see the frog, I'm going to have to take away some of this because I can't get my nippers in. And I'm just going to squeeze lightly here. I'm going to let her tell me if I'm too close. Sometimes these areas get a little bit sensitive because of the fact that they're so distorted, and they fold over and they actually pinch some of the sensitive tissue inside here. So we're going to just approach this slowly. If you'll notice, there's some chalky material in here. That's encouraging because that tells me that I can trim a little bit more off of it and move this wall that was in here. Remember, it was over the top of this center line. It was in that point. Now I've widened it over 1/2 inch simply by removing that segment of the heel. just to get a closer look at this, I'm going to take away some of this material now that I can get to it. That's dry, crusty wall. It's not crumbly like this side, but it's certainly non-functional. So I'm going to investigate it as best I can. All right. Sometimes with these little guys, you can just actually put their hind leg between your legs, very similar to the front foot. You wouldn't do this with a large horse. Okay. Now I've taken this down, and you can see that I've gotten into some what appears to be waxy material. And that's taken not nearly as much off of this side as I have this one. Okay, I'm going to trim just another 1/4 inch section off of this side, squeezing gingerly. Okay, now what we have is this side now has widened from here out to there. I'm going to go in and just take a little bit next to the frog to see if I can't find a little bit of chalky material. And it appears to be waxy, like we found on the front foot. Take a little bit of this frog. Obviously, we're going to try to get as much of this as we can. Quite often with this type of a condition where the heel rolls over, it ends up becoming real waxy, and it isn't real sensitive many times, but in order to know how far we can go, we'll certainly want to hoof test that to find out what the sensitivity level is before we go into it. Okay, so it doesn't appear to be sensitive, so I'm going to go ahead and pare just a little bit more. I would like to get more off of this side if I can. I'll just take little slivers off here. Now you'll say, well, you're into this waxy surface, and that's true, but look at the height of the heel here relative to this side. Granted, this condition's been around for a long time. We certainly can't change it overnight. But we want to make as much of an improvement on this side and get closer enough to this line if we can. As well, we're going to get down to this side as best we can. And we're going to pare this at the same basic proportions. And it looks to be like more realistic material down there now. So I'm going to go ahead and trim some of this away. The normal tendency is to say, well, this heel looks to be really the highest one, but actually it really needs very little trimming. The other side is the one that is actually the culprit that's causing this outside to go this direction. One of the things you'll find consistent with all horses' feet, regardless of whether they're ponies or whether they're burros or whatever, this heel that curls and grows inward will push the wall in the opposite direction. This heel that grows inward and over will push the wall in that direction. So looking at these from a standing view, and you say, well, this horse has got some flare that's over here, you can be assured that this is the heel that is causing most of the problem, because it's driving that whole foot in that direction. Now, you'll notice that I've got a glove on the hand that I don't have the rasp in, and you'll find that to be very helpful, because as you rasp these things down, they'll jerk their leg occasionally, and lo and behold, they're going to pull that rasp right into your hand. Now you can see a difference in the texture of this material and this material here. That's almost getting to be into a live situation. This side, however, still seems to be able to take a little bit more off. I'm just going to rasp on that. Now you see I've nearly met my goals. I'm nearly down to that line. You can see how divided down through the middle here we are. And that was the same line that I drew before. I've actually got more on this side of the foot now than I do over here. I'm going to try to increase that just a little bit. And you can see that wall gets very straight and a much better foundation for support. I'm going to flatten this off across as best I can. Now granted, this is one of the worst situations that you're likely to run into, and hopefully you can avoid these situations if you deal with them in the foal's earliest stage of their life. Okay? I'm going to rocker the toe just a little bit, get rid of some of that leverage out there. And there you are. It's going to be awful hard to make a silk purse out of this particular foot, at least today. We're going to improve it though over a period of time. If we, as I mentioned before, the things on the bottom of the foot that you saw are more important than what you see up here. Oftentimes, this type of shifting of the hoof capsule is very misleading on how to deal with it from the bottom. So mapping the foot out from the sole perspective is going to give you the best guidelines to help overcome this distortion that we see from the front here. And that's about all we're going to have. Now the center of the foot actually comes clear into here. This is wider actually. There's just a little bit of the bend of that hoof wall. Over a period of time, this will improve. It'll never get perfect, but it will improve. And hopefully it will stop and deter some arthritis from occurring in that foot. Okay. You'll notice her ankle doesn't shift over to the side as much as it did before. It would be nice if once that outside wall was repeatedly trimmed lower, it would give her even more width and support out there. So in a very short period of time, that can even become a better foundation. So it's a work in progress.